I'd like to call this meeting of the City of Harbor Springs, Michigan Planning Commission to order. It's Thursday, February 6th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. local time. And welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight. Folks watching remotely from other areas, quite a windstorm tonight. And if you're somewhere warm, congrats. And but thanks especially for tuning in, everybody. All right, first thing on the agenda is a roll call. Jeff?
Bill Mulder.
Here.
Barry Leskard.
Here.
Michael Behrman.
Here.
Bob Buckner.
Here.
Vanessa Warren.
Here.
Kenny Stewart. Here. Chip Everest. Here. Mark Bidet. Here. Annika Alonso.
Here.
We have a quorum.
And Tony Johnson is out of town. Okay. And do we have minutes?
Nope, I didn't expect.
And the next thing on the agenda is public comment and correspondence. And this is the time where you can tell the planning commission what's on your mind. And this is related to things which are not on tonight's agenda. We'll have public comment about those items. Yes. Brenda.
Brendel, what do you want to know?
Hey, do you want the podium or?
I like the podium.
Yeah.
I got it, Bill.
And I promise this is not about an agenda item because I've already addressed that in your packet. I have that later. However, I do want to make, and I worked on making this as brief and as quick as possible. Just synopsis, a quick overview of how I view what's taking place so far, and just a general background and in the mess that I think we're in. The thing I've been to most of the meetings and listened to the others, and the single most consistent theme that I've found from this is there is resounding demand for no change in Harbor Springs. People do not want to see change. And I believe that this is from 50 years of the zoning code that has put great restrictions on all growth and development in the town. I have worked with it for almost the entire 50 years with the properties that I've owned here. And I've watched it evolve through many additions and so on. And it just, everything that can be done, except for removing the parking restrictions downtown, has been done to impede and reduce potential for development. During this period, the overall demand in the area has skyrocketed. So we're seeing a code that has reduced supply and a huge skyrocketing demand. And I see this trend continuing now that we have our other code back in place. Because of this schism here between supply and demand, property values have skyrocketed. This has produced the ever-widening division between those who can afford these properties at the elevated prices and the existing owners who are either retaining their properties as an investment or who realize that if they were to sell, they will never be able to return to Harbor Springs. So they want to stay here. Both of these groups have a very strong vested interest in maintaining the status quo of no change in Harbor Springs. This schism creates an ever more unsustainable situation whereby prices continue to escalate, demand continues to grow, and existing owners are steadily forced out by increasing regulation, pressure from investors, and by dying. That's the only way that people give up their house in Harbor Springs, is to die. Over the 50 years of existence of the zoning code, we permitted, if over the 50 years of existence of this code, we had instead permitted gradual expansion of growth opportunities to meet the growing demand, we would not be experiencing this large of a gap between the cost of properties and total demand now. Historic Harbor Springs was a diverse, well-balanced community of businesses, residences, and residents who reflected a broad spectrum of personal wealth and income. Our master plan today refers to the need to maintain this diversity and variety of economic status. We are now faced with a choice. Either we continue down the path we have been following of growing inequality and increasing division, or we accept the need to change our community guidelines, broaden our conception of what the true character of Harbor Springs should look like, and make some significant changes in our zoning code in order to produce a more accurate historic composition to our city. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Looks like Maureen Kenny on Zoom.
Maureen, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yep, I just did. Hi, Maureen Kenny, 134 West Bay Street. Question, there was kind of a random letter attached at the end of our packet for tonight for the pre-read. There was no date on it, nor was it signed. Does anybody know who wrote that?
Yes, that was correspondence that was received from Matt Goldstein. He neglected to put his name on it. It was not something intentional. And I did ask him.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Who was it?
Matt Goldstein.
Okay.
He's a property owner in town.
Got it. All right, thanks.
Any other thoughts up front? Yes.
Hi, Karen Offield, Birchwood. I had a letter that I wanted to include it in the planning commission, but I didn't get it in time. So I'm going to read the little parts of it. Over the course of the last year, it's become evident that the RRC MEDC zoning requirements involved in Harbor Springs exist in at least 20 to 35 of the repealed 439 zoning code, if not more. We are not sure. If Beckett and Rader are not guided, the movie with the golf and the groundhog and the zoning repetition could become our legacy. Our city manager has said multiple times in meetings that I've attended that further involvement with the RRC is a community's choice. Why am I bringing this up at tonight's meeting? We believe that it is a city council vote that can uncouple Harbor Springs from the RRC. But it has to be the communities and the planning commission who gives this recommendation to the council. So I'm asking the planning commission tonight to begin this deliberation over the course of the weeks to hear our recommendation before the building of the zoning proceeds further down the track. We believe that the uncoupling of our town from the RRC certification can set us free to be an authentic town. Recently, we met in person with and by Zoom with the RRC Northwest Michigan representative Pablo Majeno and his supervisor. We asked questions and we received answers to some of our questions, like no money needs to be returned and Harbor Springs can remain engaged with the benefit of good practices that the city manager has said multiple times are helpful, already in place. As I personally have attended each city council, planning commission, PDA, RRC meeting for 1 year, as an observer, it is evident to me that when one does pay attention, we as a city can do better without the RRC. A letter written to the RRC from the city council is the only step that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, any other comments up front? All right. First thing on the agenda tonight is a special visit by HSPS Superintendent Brad Pleckmeyer. And Brad, would you like to come up here and sit next to one of your star pupils.
Oh, yeah. Don't you behave yourself? That's fine.
The genesis of this is that, we're talking a lot about city, the future of the city, nature of the city, and, we gave you a volunteer on purpose.
Sorry.
And, we throw around a whole lot of things. Well, wouldn't it be great for schools, wouldn't it be great for the schools if we did such and such? And, President, Audrey Chapman mentioned that meetings ago, hey, maybe we ought to actually get, Brad here to talk about what he really needs rather than us, surmising what you need and how we can be of assistance. And then, Ashley O'Reilly latched onto that. And so anyway, that's what brings us here tonight. And, I was hoping that you could just, talk with us and we can, just answer questions. Why don't you take over running the meeting? That way you can call on people when it makes sense. And, if we could, target, half an hour or less, that would be great. Out of respect for your time.
Good. Brett Blackmeyer, Superintendent, Harbor Springs Schools. I guess I don't have anything really like written out. So I just kind of talk about what we do at school and you can ask questions and kind of go from there. So, really what we try to do on a daily basis is get kids ready for when they leave us. They're ready to go do what they want to do. We're here. One getting ready to do that. That starts all the way down with our pre-K kids, all the way up through, and even down into early childhood. We have infants and toddlers down there. One thing we started this year, we expanded our pre-K to a full day to kind of get them ready for that transition to kindergarten, the lower elementary at Shea, K4 now. And then the Shea kids, same thing, get them ready for middle school, get ready for high school, get them ready to move on. So a lot of things going on, all the way through the elementaries. I say there are 3 sections. So you'll have about between small classes, you have about 50 kids in a grade level up to a big one, probably 70. It's about right. 70 is getting kind of the large end of that for us. So 3 sections, 3 homerooms, kind of a thing. When they get into high school, it looks a little bit different because they're moving around different classes, but still you have about that many kids. In our district, we currently have 270 kids at Shea, which is K4, 238 at the middle school, 5th or 8th grade, and then 281 at the high school. So that's kind of where we're at on that part. Been pretty consistent. One thing that was different last year, we graduated the smallest class. I haven't gone back and looked at like all the way back to Harbor Springs, but recent memory, couple less than 40, so 38, 39 kids. So that was a very small class. However, the grade level that graduates this year has 79. So, there's a lot of kids, there's a big difference there. So as that group came through, I actually happened to be the principal at the middle school and the high school. Those groups started to come through. It was just different. You had 2 sections instead of 3, sometimes 4, that kind of stuff. So getting ready for that, but some of the partnerships that we do have, whether it's with the city or other things around us, kids at the high school will see partnerships with SHRM, because one thing that we would never be big enough to have our own, think of vocational VOTEC. We're not gonna be big enough ever to have our own core with all the things we have. So we team with them for all the different sites in SHRM have different programs. So if our kids want to do line worker, they go to Boyne City. They want to do culinary, building trades, auto, they'll go to Petoskey. There's others in Petoskey too, like aviation through Alliance and Pelston. If you're doing welding or small engine repair, that's Pelston as well. We house AEVE, which is like music production, music and video production. We're the only one that has that. We have graphic arts, business, drones. We're the only one in the ISD that has drones. So if anybody in the ISD wants to do drones, they come to us. Also started this year, cosmetology. So that's run out of Blackbird. So this year is the first year of that. So they're kind of going through all the students, our first year students, so they can't work on the public yet. So next year they'll have 2 rooms they'll use there. One will be the salon. So if you want haircuts, manicures, that kind of stuff, you can go there. Students can work on it. I don't think you're allowed to ask them what their grades are before you do it though. That kind of thing. But that's one of those things that we have a lot of kids that come from all over the ISD for that. So a lot of the schools in the ISD are the same. They aren't big enough to house all of those things on their own, but we work together to do that. So typically a kid, if they're going to one of those programs, junior or senior, they will have, they'll use 3 of their hours if they're traveling. So you use like either your morning 3 hours, your afternoon 3 hours, or on a 6-period day. And then if you're our kids here, they give up 2, because we're already here, they don't have to travel that far. Blackbird's not that far of a commute from the high school. So, you know, we partner with them to do that with Shariam. Also, just local businesses. We have a lot of kids that do internships, like different local businesses throughout, or different companies, that kind of stuff, and that's been awesome. You know, we have kids that get to senior year and they have their core classes they need to finish up. You have a math, an English, maybe a science or a history. And then instead of taking like 3 teachers assistants or classes that I don't want to say don't mean anything to them, they don't. I mean, they can go out and start doing that and get ready for what they're going to do after us. You know, some kids, that's they take dual credit classes, part of NCMC. On that, we offer some in-house. Others, our kids will travel down to NCMC and do that. We'll have kids leave with up to 30 hours. How many hours do you have? College hours? None yet?
Oh.
But Annika's been, she's in CTE, so that does the same thing. She's been all the way through, taking advantage of a lot of stuff that we've had, I'd say. She's a decent golfer, maybe. We don't count all the mulligans, maybe. But as you go down through, like down to the middle school, same kind of thing. We bus our, a lot of the middle school kids go up to the high school in 7th and 8th grade for the electives. It's like the intro to wood shop, because the middle school doesn't have a wood shop in it. They'll go up and they get an intro to wood shop class. So they can see if they like that. The art room up at the high school just has more stuff in it. You know, it's more secondary based. So they'll go up there for that with graphic arts and those kinds of things. The weight room's up there, so strength conditioning. Don't have a weight room at the middle school. And then band is at the middle school. So they're at both buildings for that. Then as you progress down and you get down to the elementary, you know, there's a lot of different things that they do. They have all their specials or elective classes that they have. They kind of go and experiment in different things. They travel as groups, but then the community partnerships with that are, if I just tried to start naming them all, we'd be here for a long time. You know, everything from elementary kids go out to the Highlands and ski. You know, a lot of places. I mean, where I grew up, it was Missouri. So if you went on a ski trip, that was a whole weekend thing, had a big fundraiser and had to do all this stuff. Here, that's Wednesday. You hop on a bus in the morning, you go out, they have it all ready for you. You have your ski instruction, you come back. Our kids, just walking field trips downtown, down to the bay. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, like our kid, I tell my kids that you don't know what you have unless you haven't ever been there and done that kind of a thing. Like our drones class, they have an underwater drone. They can walk down and put it in the bay. You know, some places would have to, like, I don't know, we'll get a horse trough, fill it with water and put it in there and like mess around. You know, we could actually take it, put it in the bay, walk down there and do that. Or they can fly the drones and go just all kinds of different stuff they can do. And like the 2nd-year drones kids, there's different companies, different construction places around town. They'll have them come out and do different things for them, so they get on the job experience, just kind of seeing what it is, those kinds of things. Our AEVE, the music production one, I call it music production. That's what it was called before it got fancy and stuff, but back when it was in Shea. So they partnered with, called it Hollywood to Harbor. So a lot of people came in that were experts in the industry from Hollywood, came in out of the Manitou and Club Ponytail. I think I said that right, or Club Manitou and one of the ones. Anyway, they did that, and they are making a documentary on that, to where you go out and they're exploring the tunnels, looking through those things. That's actually on our website. Go in. They're put all that together. That's pretty cool. Our kids got to go out and do that, and the people that came in, our middle school and high school kids got to do that. But the people that came in, when they talk about the movies that they had worked on, you know, they're talking about like the Marvel series, not like the random one they shot with their brother in the backyard. You know, it's like the actual people that had worked on this stuff. And they brought our kids got to stand side by side and work with them on that. So those are the things that are really awesome that we can do here that a lot of places can't. You know, there's a lot of things that we do offer here that a lot of schools our size don't or can't. You know, an example would be we have some advanced placement courses, and, you know, some places you go, you have to have 20 kids in a class to run them. You know, we have the resources. We don't have to do that. We could, if 5 kids need it, we'll find a way to run it. Or if, you know, we need to go do something, we can get kids there to do it, or the community will help us out to do that. So those are the kinds of things I think that we don't have 1,000 kids in our high school. there's a lot of things that we can do that schools that they do. And if we can't, we can partner with other buildings or other schools, or we can partner with Petoskey for things, or Lance Health, whatever it might be. So those are some things that we can do. I can keep talking, I guess, if I have any questions so far.
Yeah, question.
Oh, sorry.
What percentage of the students live outside the district?
Oh, man, it's a good question. You don't have that number with me, but, I have to get back to you on that one. I can't give you an exact number on that one. We have, one thing I didn't mention is we don't participate in schools of choice anymore. What we do, we have a tuition program to where if a kid that's outside of the district wants to come, they would pay tuition, and it's $5,000 a year. And the reason we went to that is not the state allowance, that's mid-9,000s. We did that because for every 20 teachers you would add, that's about what it would cost. Divide that. So again, about 5,000. But our kids that were schools of choice before, they were grandfathered in. So if I was already here on schools of choice and I've been going to school for a while, I didn't all of a sudden pay tuition. So that's kind of a misconception we get sometimes. And if I, like, let's say Annika had a little brother that was 2, that whole family's grandfathered in all the way through. So we don't separate families or anything like that. So I will get that back to you. I don't know now. Sorry.
Guys, 2 questions. First, I know the robotics program has been quite strong in the area, and I'm just curious how that is run. Is that across multiple school districts similar to the other sharing you described, or is that focused more on Harbor? How does that work?
Well, for us, so the actual one is like a class. So your high school, the drones is like the robotics. So that's the high school class, the CTE class. But then we have the elementary Lego robotics, just us. And there might be a kid or 2 from somewhere else. We have that for us. So we have them, they do their season, then the middle school kids have a season, and then the high school kids have their own season as well. In fact, they're going with Monday night, approving 2 overnight trips for them to go to the FRC competitions.
So all that really takes place through our school
Yes.
district. Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I have is obviously we're worried about zoning issues for the city, and I know there's been a lot of construction, all that stuff for the schools, but now that you're here, knowing that we're laboring through the various zoning issues, is there anything we should have on our minds from your perspective? Look out for, make sure you do this, or we have an impact in a relationship to this, and anything for us?
I don't know. I mean, we do hear from families that on the tuition side that we can't afford to live in the district. We'll hear that a lot. And that's one of those things there's not a lot I can do about that. But we have to explain what we have and how we can do different things. But like some will choose to pay tuition, some don't. And but you can also, if you're an employee of the district, that waives the tuition, not just a teacher. So we have different options you can get in. Like if Mr. Behrman live in the district and he's driving a bus, that counts. So if you're doing this, we have a lot of things. It doesn't have to be just a teacher. So we have people that take advantage of that to help us out. We do have some shortages. And that helps a lot too. Yes.
Are you aware of hiring challenges because professionals like teachers, principals cannot afford to live here? And so they don't go for a job or they don't take the job?
I'm here, so I moved from Kansas, so we don't live in town, but like I think that I think that's nationwide in education. So like when we go to our superintendent's meetings and we talk about how many applicants we have, I think if you go probably 10, 15 years ago, you'd have a teaching opening here, you'd have 100+ applicants, say elementary teacher. I think we'll get probably 10, 15, 20 now. When we go to our superintendent meetings, we're on the very high end of that. So high end being we have the most applicants. We have an advocate position open right now. We're currently at 12. We received 12 applications for. There's other people that have similar like dean of students type positions open. They got like 1. So I think that we're still a destination district, and people that haven't that lived away from here, like there's a person that called me on the advocate one from Florida. I was explaining to them just kind of what it's like here because they had a spouse that also in education. I told them our district's not super huge where you would have you know, 5 elementary schools, you have like 5 elementary openings all the time. Like, we may not have one, but other schools in the ISD have openings to where it might be a 25-minute drive. You know, like my wife, the first couple of years we lived here, she taught in Point Falls. And that was actually shorter of a drive than when we lived in Colorado, we worked in the same district. So for us, it's just, you're driving not across the city and through stoplights, but it's a challenge, yeah. And like we've had, I wouldn't say we've lost teachers that we've offered positions to because they couldn't find a place to live. You know, we had one that just came out of college and the guy was like, I don't want to be that far away. Okay, how much we can do about that? But the ones we've had, probably the last 2 years, 2 or 3 years, we've had a lot of retirements. We haven't experienced a ton of that. A lot of those people were local anyway, or already lived here. So we haven't had a lot that were trying to relocate. We've had a few, but not that many. And I think the ones they can try it. I don't think that it's not more than 20 minutes.
So one of the things I'd like to see is maybe attracting better families to move to the city of Harbor Springs. It was brought to our attention at one of our meetings on Zillow. The school district here received a 6. And it looked like it was for funding, and I know funding really isn't an issue with that. Is that something that we can fix to try to up the numbers to be able to track people that are? I know school districts is a big thing when somebody's looking at real estate and.
Yeah, I think with the Zillow thing, we've been looking at that as well, and I've talked to them, or especially other great schools maybe is the other one. When I call them, I say, we just pull what's online from you. And there's not a lot we can do other than I told them like, okay, well, Blackbird doesn't have kindergarten through 2nd grade anymore. I mean, correct those things with them. But some of the stuff, you know, when you're a school our size, all of the subgroups might not have all the subgroups that some of the other districts have. So where they don't qualify, or they might be small enough that they might really inflate you one time and really not the other. So that's kind of, we're trying to work with them to figure out what are you counting? And is that the correct data? Is it, you have it right up, even down to, like if you have this listed as a K2 building, Blackbird, there's no kids in that one. And K4 might, I don't know, change the numbers on that one way or the other. So that's kind of, you know, I know one of them at the high school level is number of AP classes. We have 2 that we offer in person because we don't have that many kids.
Right.
And I've been in schools that, you know, we have 15, 20 AP classes, and I'd rather have my kid go through Harbor Springs.
Not for sure.
than that. So I know that's one factor that factors in on the high school side, is the number of AP offerings.
Okay.
And that's one thing that we're kind of, hey, we're gonna take a hit on that because, yeah. And you almost need 1,000 students to be offering that many classes. That's one of them. But we do get a lot of calls though from people that are looking to relocate to the area.
Yeah.
That talk about schools, they'll come in for tours, and then I always tell them, make sure that, because in Power School, you can go in and put an address. It'll pull up the district maps and tell you exactly which one around you're in. I'm like, they'll call back and say, tell me where this address is, and we'll tell them.
Right.
And if it is, they're like, okay, and if it's not, they'll move on. But like, they've never called me and said like, why is your Zillow rating 6?
Right.
Like, well, when they come in and look and they're like, oh my gosh, this place is pretty
I
awesome.
mean, that's why we went here.
Yeah.
So.
Us too.
Yeah.
Question.
Is there a push to increase enrollment from outside the district?
I mean, we can, but it's one of those things like the elementary right now, when you're talking 70 kids at a grade level. We've been pretty comfortable at 3 sections all the way through. That's about the max you're gonna have on that. We do get more tuition kids that come high school wise, probably the other grade levels, because I think of the things that we offer and different things like that. So we'll have some students, now you gotta play like in sports and stuff, you have to be a full-time enrollee. We do have some kids that come that might be homeschooled or whatever it might be, that they'll come halftime for some classes, come for the electives, that kind of thing.
Brad, we've heard parents in our room here say that they'd love to have more kids in their students' grades, so they could do more and have, better teams, more activities, that kind of thing. Do you hear that from parents as well, or?
Sometimes I probably hear more of, they like the size that it is. Now, unless you're in the group that's like 38, and you're like, we don't have that many kids to, I mean, graduation was like half an hour shorter than it was probably this year, but I mean, it's one of those things that typically they like the size that we have. And the offerings that we do, because like in our conference, if I'm thinking sport wise, sports that we don't have, the new conference we're in right now, and it's kind of similar to the Lake Michigan one, we don't have wrestling. Like that's probably about the only one that we don't have. Bowling, there's like 4 schools that have bowling. Those are the only 2. We have everything else. The other ones all do. We might not have it all the way down like freshman level teams, but we have all the things that they offer. And I know there's a question over here. Yes.
Brett, I know you've been here a couple of years now, or you're on your second year, right?
3rd year for superintendent, 8th overall.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so what's happening to the overall enrollment in the Harbor Springs schools? And why is why are we no longer in the same division that Petoskey and play sports?
I don't think we were ever recently in the same division Petoskey was in. I think so if I start with just like our regular conference, football is different because there's 3 conferences that come together for that, because there's 8-man football and all that kind of stuff, and we messed with that. So Petoskey's in the Big North. They do play us in certain things. To my knowledge, we've always been Lake Michigan. I'm not sure what it was before that, but it's always been like us, Boyne City. They're one of the bigger ones in the conference. Probably Kalkaska, I think by enrollment is the biggest. So when you go through that, we're one of the smallest ones in it. And I don't want to jinx this for this year, but they have a traveling like all sports trophy where you get points for however your teams finish. We're currently in the lead for that. It takes into account all of the sports and the different activities. But it's one of those things that us, Charlevoix, East Jordan are pretty much the same size. So we're always in the same district. So we always end up playing each other. He's not East Jordan anymore because they're in the Ski Valley, but we always play each other twice and then you see each other in districts. Sometimes Boyne City would, enrollment wise, would get put in our class, but Petoskey, I mean, they're like 3 classes bigger than us. So, you know, in football, they're in the big North, which ours is the Northern Michigan Football League. So the big schools and there's 3 divisions of it this year. The big division was your, like Kingsley, Boyne City was in that, Grayling, and so the schools that were that size. The middle division was Charlevoix, Elk Rapids, the schools that were that size. We were like one of the biggest between us, Mansalona, and East Jordan in the small division. So you had those schools.
Yeah, so I was sure when we first moved here that we used to play Petoskey in football, but maybe not, but.
You might have, like in soccer, like some of those sports we will, like football is one of the ones that you have just the sheer number of athletes, and you can talk about this forever, like they're more 2 platooning where our guys play both ways, that kind of stuff. Like our golf team can go out and hang with them.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So getting back to the history of the enrollment.
Yeah.
You have stats, is the population of the schools, is it dwindling every year?
I think it's smaller. I wouldn't necessarily say every year. I say the last couple of years it has, because we had that small group that went through.
Okay.
Now it kind of bounced back up. I know one year when that small group was going through the high school, I think we reported like 240. We're at 280 this year just because that group moved out. You have 30 more kids in there and stuff. I think on the big years, like when they built the middle school, there was about 190 to 100 kids in a grade level. I think that was a bubble. So, I mean, I can remember my first day walking into that middle school. I was like, my gosh, we're gonna have a ton of kids here. And we got them all in the gym, and it was the one side. So like that gym there, that building's big enough. There's like 400 and some lockers in it, to where even when last year we had 3rd through 8th grade in there, everybody had a locker. So it was built like during that time whenever they had the big bubble of kids coming through. So it's huge. And the high school obviously got added on to at that point too, but it's one of those things that I think right now, kind of where we sit, like the grade levels, if they're in the 50s, that's on the low end. But the ones that are up on the 70 to 75, that's probably we can house that and do it. So that's probably on the bigger end of what we would have. So I'd say high school wise, would that be like 300 kids? Would probably be on the bigger end of it, what we would do. That I can see us getting to, and on the small end, probably 220, 230, 240. That's if you get a couple small classes back in. Like our I just got it up here in front of me. Our first grade right now has 41. And the grades on either side have 60. Don't know why. No, it just happens that way.
So kindergarten has 60.
Mhm. And in our pre-K in those two sections, we have 33. So we have two sections, one's got 17, one's got 16. Make sure I did my math right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then also in kindergarten, sorry, I left this out, we have TK, transitional kindergarten started 4 years ago, 3 years ago. All right, I didn't fact check. To where we actually have 4 sections there. So you have the 3 regular kindergartens and transitional kindergarten. When the kids go through that, they can either go to regular kindergarten that next year or first grade. I think that at one point here, they called it early 4s, early 5s, that kind of stuff. It's transitional kindergarten.
Do you know how many of your students and employees actually live in the city of Harbor Springs?
Man, I do not have that right off the top of my head.
I think those would be interesting numbers for the planning commissions to know. I also think it would be interesting to know if they don't live in the city, especially your employees, where they come from.
I can tell you kind of where they come from. I don't know, I can't give you the exact numbers, but we have people that drive from, we have some from Charlevoix, Boyne City on that end. I'm just going all the way around. We have some from like Sheboygan. Our CFOs from Onaway, all the way up like Mackinac City. We have some that come from St. Ignace.
Those are big drives.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then, I'm trying to think other ones. We have, Lance and Pelston.
Yeah, okay, thanks. It'd be interesting to know how many kids actually live in the city.
I could get that, I just didn't bring it tonight.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it used to be a lot more than it is now, so I would just.
This is a little different tack. A number of years ago, 20, 25, maybe even 30 years ago. And it must have been a bubble like you described. There was a push to relocate the school outside of town, out on Quick Grove. Are you familiar with this?
I've heard about this.
Okay,
I've had people beg me and say, don't, when we started doing our construction, like, do not do that.
well, and there was an emphatic response from the community it went to a plebiscite of the whole district, perhaps. I don't remember how it was, but it was emphatic to keep the school here. Do you have any sense that the physical location of the school and the schools around it, the sub-schools, is a positive or a negative for the students or the staff?
I don't know. I think you have a hard time finding a nicer setting for a school where the high school sits. I mean, it's pretty, when you go talk to our art teacher, and whether it's the art teacher at the high school, where they can just walk out the door and they draw that, or the elementary when they can walk, or middle school when they want to do a walking field trip 3 blocks, they can draw the bag, that kind of thing. So, or they can just walk down if they're doing science stuff, and do that, or just some of the things they can access here. But being in town, I think, is a bigger deal. I like that. We talk about, we shuttle bus the kids across town. I mean, it's 3 blocks. And, but I mean, that's where they're coming from, the middle school and Shea is kind of all one because they're connected. But I think having it in town is awesome. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's one of those things that you have a hard time finding a better setting, not just where the high school is, but just the way it's all set up right there. I mean, K through 8, we can walk right down the hallway and be all together, but it's still separate and you can keep them separate. I mean, talk about the construction stuff that we're trying to do, but I mean, that's in 2003, that's when they did the middle school, and that's kind of when they did that part. And, right now they did it pretty well because 20 years later, now we're doing like replacing carpet, that kind of stuff. They did that. So we're trying to do those kinds of things this summer. That's what middle of high school will be, is those renovations inside, not like huge renovations, carpeting, painting, those kinds of things. And then the bigger stuff that everybody could see was last summer with Shea Elementary and that kind of stuff. But I don't have any plans. I don't think the board does either, of wanting to move the school somewhere else. Is anybody from Charlevoix in here? Well, a lot of people say, they said, do not do what Charlevoix did. Okay.
So with having teachers from like out of the school limits, you have like an action plan, so for say, Mr. Bama, who's across. the bridge.
Yep.
Do you have like a plan for them in case the bridge is closed for where they?
Yeah, we have people that either they get across and or get somewhere, and whether it's across the bridge or anywhere else, they don't stay in their classroom in a tent or anything. And then we slide them crackers. We don't do that. But like, no, we do. And we have that happen sometimes. We have to get somebody a sub or whatever because they're running late, that kind of stuff. We do that as well.
We probably ought to be wrapping up with Brad pretty quickly.
I think there was one more.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
great.
when my twins graduated from high school, there was 120 kids in
Yeah.
their class. Yeah, it was, I think, the biggest class maybe ever, but I know it kind of fluctuated between 60 and 80 at that point. So now we're quite a bit smaller. You attribute that to cost of living? Do you find some kids are going to other schools in the area by choice? Or do you have a sense, do we have some competition?
We get some, like for the schools of choice, they'll, even though since we aren't doing it, but like let's say a kid from Harbor Springs goes to Petoskey, they still have to fill out the form, we sign off on it, they don't have any discipline. A lot of the ones we find, they've done that since kindergarten. It's like reason for going to Petoskey, Lansing, Pellsville, whatever it might be, have been there since kindergarten. So the ones going from here, they've been doing that for a long time. Or their sibling did it, they're continuing on with that. We don't have too many that go mid-year, and honestly, we'll get move-ins throughout the year. Like people coming up and, we thought we might have a bunch during the pandemic just because we were open the whole time, except for a couple of little instances, but we actually have had more either before or since, if you just take those times and say how many kids moved in during those times, more probably before and after. Some that came up during the pandemic stayed because they came up here because we were in person. And then once they got here, they're like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And that was, I don't know. I think it speaks volumes for not just the school, but just the community. It's a great place. I know when we interviewed up here, my wife and our kids stayed in the Holiday Inn, not Holiday Inn, Best Western, the one up on the corner. And after the interview, we were driving back to Kansas and we really didn't talk about it too much because we didn't want to mess it up because it was pretty sweet. And then when we got the call, it was pretty no brainer. Yeah, we're going. The whole way back, we didn't say a word. It was like, well, let's not talk about it and get our hopes up in case it doesn't happen because it's the pretty cool place.
So we get a comment or a question on Zoom, it looks like. Hands iPad.
Yeah, hi, this is Ann Askew. I have a question about the tracking of your graduates once they leave the high school. For the ones that graduate, what professions are they going into, and are they staying local or are they traveling? And for the ones that go to college, are they coming back, and what careers are they pursuing?
I think it's a wide range. We have kids that, go everywhere from, your big universities to the smaller ones, majoring in a lot of things. And to where I don't have that all in front of me right now. I can get it for you, but a lot of them come back, and when they're done, I'll say that two of our teacher hires over the last 2 years, three of our teacher hires over the last 3 years are kids that graduated from here. And they went away and they wanted to come back. And so they're like, this is maybe not right when they graduated, but within 5 years of their graduation, like if a job in Harbor Springs opened up, they wanted to come back up here. We also get calls I'll get stuff from people that are alumni, like, hey, just keep me in mind in case something opens up. We'd like to get back up there. They've gone away. Now they'd like to come back. We have kids that go all over for college and a lot stay local. And I think it just speaks to try to match them up with what their best, what would set them up best for their future. Some kids that it might be good for them to go to like a U of M or Michigan State, kind of a big university like that, because it's big. They can mix around there. By other people, that's like worst case scenario, that you go to a class where they just take attendance every once in a while and you show up on if you want to. Other ones, they go to a smaller university or smaller college where on your dorm floor, your RA is like your counselor. And if you don't go to class, they hunt you down. I know my coaches when I was in college playing baseball, that's what they did. If you didn't go, they were at your apartment knocking on your door. They drug you there. So it's kind of one of those things, 'cause it's like the best matchup for them. But we have kids that come back that, you know, you'll see them working, or they'll come, or, you know, we have kids that, and they'll come back and talk to us like, hey, I got a job, trying to get back up to the area, or they will have gotten relocated back up to the area and say, I've been working to try to do this. And I mean, some, because I've only been here 8 years, so some will come back and say, took me 10 years, but I made it back. That's pretty cool when somebody says that. Because, you know, when you're a senior, they might say, oh, I can't wait to get out of here. But really, I mean, it's
So
not
the
that
school system doesn't do any tracking with data, actual hard data? Because, you know, one
we
of the
do.
thing in the
I
economic
just don't
plan
have it
is
in
to
front of me right
lower,
now.
is to lower the median age of the town. So it'd be interesting to see if these kids who are graduating are finding opportunities back here, or if they're seeking them in bigger cities to start their careers. If the opportunities in the industries and the careers and job opportunities just aren't present in the northern Michigan area for them. But you did talk a lot about vocational schools and what percentage of the kids are going into vocational programs or apprenticeships, especially given the big building industry we have up there.
I would say that's stuff I can get you. We track it. I just don't have it with me right now. If I had known I needed it, I could have brought that kind of stuff. So, you know, we do have the kids that I can get you those numbers. We have kids that come back up and work in our trades up here, because that's, you know, one of the things our woodworking teachers do, or kids do with Mr. Reed, is they'll go and tour the things that construction sites, like last year they went to one on Week, came back and said, okay, these are the different things you can do inside of building trades. You know, it's not just about building walls. You could be a cabinet maker, be whatever it might be. And so those kids went and got internships, and they stayed on with them. One's 2 years in, one just started last year with them, or this is first year after graduation. I can get those numbers and bring them back if you'd like, where kids go, how many are out of state, how many come back that we know of. You know, after probably about 10 years, the trackers might lose track of.
Okay, well, we better wrap up, and thank you so much, Superintendent, for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're really pulling for you, and please let us all know if there's anything that the city and the public can do to support you.
Okay. Likewise, if anybody has any questions, we're stuff there. You can always come by.
Good.
Brad, I was lucky enough to graduate Harbor Springs High Schools in 1984. And had the opportunity to move back to the community in 2015. I'm happy that I did. I don't know if that's a promotion or a warning. It's a data point. Yep. It's a data point.
Great. Okay. You don't have to stay for the next part.
Okay.
You'd be welcome to, but you don't. Great, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Let's see. All right, next thing on the agenda is the zoning code article review schedule. And this is scheduled for January for our work. It's in the package. It has green bar. And yep. And so here we are, and tonight we're going to take a look at Article 1, 11, 12, and 13. And on the agenda for next 2 weeks from tonight would be Articles 6 and 8. And that's if we make it through the articles that are on the agenda for tonight. We don't have to. I think we could go as long as we want to tonight, as long as we feel productive. And but don't feel you have to go through everyone that feels rushed in any way. So planning commissioners, you guys speak up if you're feeling like you're losing focus. Hard to believe that you could, but okay.
I'm gonna apologize in advance. I'm gonna have to leave at 7. There's a basketball team representing Harbor Springs. The once varsity is playing in Sheboygan, and we had a situation with a driver that's not available, and I'm the only person available. Well, that would be available to bring them back home from Sheboygan. So I apologize in advance for leaving at 7. I don't want to. My boss just walked out. I don't want to And left with a bunch of stranded kids in Chicago.
Great. Okay, good. And so here we go. We've been working up to this point for a number of weeks and months now to figure out the best way to attack our zoning code. So we're gonna see how this goes. And I'm gonna try not to run the meeting in a super formal way. I said we were gonna be collaborative. I don't know how that's gonna work, but anyway, let's try to work together and figure out the best way to attack this. The John Icoangeli, our Beckett Rader planner, he is on Zoom somewhere. And Jeff is gonna find him on Zoom probably. John, you wanna come in?
John, if you could raise your Zoom hand so that we can see you and unmute you. I'm not seeing him on here, so we can proceed on. With
Yeah.
his
Give us a
absence.
second, we really do need him.
Yep.
Hello, hello, John Icoangeli, are you there somewhere? Let me step out and see if I can call him and bring him on.
Mute. What's that?
Hi, John, are you with us?
Yeah, you there, Jeff?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we're good now.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Good. Okay, John, I was thinking you could take us through these articles one at a time and we'll set up each one. You can tell us what the goal is of an article and then what we should know about it. Planning commissioners, I know, have some notes and so we'll have to figure out how we wordsmith a document with 9 people providing input at the table and perhaps even more in the room. And so we'll try to figure out how to do that and see how it goes. All right, John, what do we need to know about Article 1?
It muted him.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm here again. Thanks, Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, the first thing is I sent the planning commission the sections that were in the current code. And then I sent you the sections that were in the proposed code. You'll note on the current code, which is the one that we're currently operating under, you'll notice in the first line, it says that the authority of the zoning code is pursuant to Act 207 of Public Acts of 1921. That public act no longer exists. So the purpose of Article 1, title and purpose, basically states the title, which is the City of Harbor Springs zoning ordinance. It states the purpose, which comes out of the state statute. You know, the common language in a introduction to zoning. It's basically to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the community. One of the things that we included in the proposed code, which is not in the preamble of the state statute, is that the code also promotes and approves development of land that's consistent with the continuation of historical development patterns and existing street patterns in the city. So that's new. That's not, you can't find that in the state statute, but that was put into the proposed code, basically to recognize the historic land development patterns of the community, which were then translated into Article 3 in terms of the lot sizes that were proposed based on the lot sizes that we currently find over in some parts of the city that currently exist. The area of jurisdiction is Article 1.3, which is basically the jurisdiction of the zoning code is the city of Harbor Springs, Emmett County. 1.4 is relationship to the master plan, which basically says that the zoning code will implement the city of Harbor Springs master plan, along with other planning documents, and guide the long-term physical development of the city. So that's what Article 1 says in terms of the kind of the preamble of the zoning code. So does the PC, a planning commission, have any questions on that?
Hi, John, it's Vanessa. I get tongue-tied in the purpose 1.2 where it says to meet the needs of the state's residents for places of residence. Is that coming right out of the state statute? Is that why that's there?
I'd have to check.
Worded oddly.
I'd have to check, Vanessa. Some of this was pulled directly out of the state statute because the state statute talks about inappropriate overcrowding, which actually dates back to the Amber Realty Village of Euclid case back in 1921. So that, I can tell you that part comes out of the state statute. If you suggest a change for places of residence, happy to do it.
Yeah, or to provide, it seems very wordy and I get lost on that.
I have a question on the purpose. Still on evidence.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, I guess, John, this is Chip Everest. Back to that, to meet the needs of the state residents, why do we care about the state's residents?
Because the city of Harbor Springs is not a state of its own. The city of Harbor Springs, the residents are residents of the state.
Is this a state mandate? Do we have this in the language?
I'd have to check the, I don't have the state statute in front of me. But
I just wanted to use the words to provide. Get rid of
My
the-
point is, why about the state's residents? Why are we not just worried about the city's residents? That's one point. And then the other point I have is, we talking here about encouraging a walkable and non-motorized community. I know that's part of our master plan. We talk about following the master plan in section 1.4. Why are we referring to one point of the master plan in this purpose? It seems like it's arbitrary to me.
When we review zoning cases before the city, we tend to fall back on the purpose of the overall code and purpose of the appropriate district. And I think one of the things that stands out in the master plan because of the size of the city is that it's walkable, and the community, obviously during the summer, you have a lot of non-motorized traffic. I felt that was important enough to put in the general article that characterizes some of the attributes and assets of the community.
Well, my point is, I mean, I agree that it's important, but I also agree it's important to maintain the historical value of the city. And there's lots of parts of the master plan that are important as well.
Would you recommend just taking that?
I would take it out.
But all of it?
I would take out, no, we need public services and facility needs. And to promote public health, safety and welfare.
So to encourage a walkable, non-motorized community,
I would take that out.
take that out, so it reads, and facility needs and promote public health, safety and welfare.
Right. I would not have one part of the master plan in this portion.
I would disagree. I guess I'll throw this a counterpoint out. I really do think that's a mistake.
Okay.
I mean, the characteristics of Harbor Springs are that it is a small community. It's got historic assets. It's built on a traditional grid street pattern, and it's extremely walkable, and it's non-motorized. I mean, I think those are fundamental characteristics of the community. So my professional opinion is I wouldn't take them out, but if the planning commission wants to, that's fine. But I think that really summarizes the context of the community in a few phrases.
If we just took out non-motorized and said to encourage a walkable community, would that
Yeah, I mean,
address your concern?
Well, my point is that there's lots of parts of the master plan.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And why are we just talking about this? I mean, right, this time of year, it's not walkable, not motorized. And so, I mean, it's like,
I think it's one.
why are we doing, why even just point out this one portion of it?
What if we generalize and just do master plan or to follow?
But that's what it says in 1.4.
Right,
We're following the master.
and just leave it at
I
that.
would take it out.
And that's-
And also, I still don't understand why we have to worry about the state's residents versus our residents.
So let's see if we can get consensus on a couple of things.
That's my point.
That's all we're trying to do. Oh, all right, yes.
As far as the state's residents, a fair number of our residents in town don't live in Michigan. We've got people from Indiana, Ohio, and California. Isn't there a better way to state that? To include all our residents?
Yeah, I'd like to lose the whole thing and just say to provide. Unless for some reason they're forcing us to put that verbiage
To
in.
just provide residents.
Right.
Yes.
That's a good point. Yes.
Regarding the walkable thing, another way that they could possibly word that is including but not limited to walkable, whatever.
Okay. I think Chip's point though is why pick out one aspect of the.
Right, well, that would say, pick out one, but also let people
My
know.
point is
that
don't
there's
pick out
more.
one.
Okay, so let me see if I can give John some instructions on this. John, could you find out if we can delete the wording about the state's residents?
Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
Just
Okay,
call it
I think we would like that, right?
To provide residents.
Yeah, there's some more general type wording on that. And then two, let's strike the walkable and non-motorized aspect. And see what that looks like. You'll redline it for us and we'll see it struck out and then we can review, see how we
Yeah.
feel about it. Yeah, okay.
And I have two other changes to this area I recommend. 1.2. 6 lines down, it says limit the inappropriate overcrowding of land. I think we all kind of understand that, but I propose that we add overcrowding of land with structures. And I know that you've defined the word structure. Just, overcrowding of land by itself seems like it's crowded with what, but it seems like structures is the key thing that everybody is worried about. So I would propose adding those two words. And then at the very end of that section, after the walkable safety and welfare, I would recommend that we add the words with an ongoing regard for the environment. And the reason for that is, the fundamental creation of Harbor Springs as a town was based on the logging and the water and the deep harbor and all those things, and certainly the recreational benefits. I think that's good to put up front.
So where would you put that?
I would put that right at the very end of that paragraph, however it turns out. Need to encourage or promote public health, safety and welfare with an ongoing regard for the environment. So that's what I propose. I'm open to your thoughts.
To me, that's just another aspect of the master plan.
But it's not so much that we're just adding to the master plan, it's the fact that there's a lot of stuff in this ordinance that doesn't even begin to talk about green infrastructure and green design. So if we're gonna throw it in there that that's the purpose, okay, great. Then it's gonna get opened up and we're gonna start to talk about solar panels and green roofs and all other things. So I just want to be careful because it's really not the purpose of this, because as far as green infrastructure is concerned, this is not heavy in it.
No, I agree with you, and I didn't mean to direct our efforts to focus on environment as a key pillar, shall we say. I simply wanted to nod the fact that what we do is going to be in consideration of those things as well as all the other things. But if you're nervous about it opening a big door, then we can strike it.
Anybody have any thoughts on that one?
I actually agree with that. We should strike it.
Okay, fair enough. I'll retract my suggestion.
All right. What else do you got?
I like your structure though. So,
Well, if I could provide a comment on there, this is the purpose of the zoning code. And we might not want to limit the purpose to talking about structures. We have items in the zoning code that are related to non-structural issues. And I would have a concern that that might limit our ability to enforce.
Things like storage, things like
Storage of vehicles or, you know, various other
paved surfaces.
Like poles or whatever. Yeah, I understand. So let's strike that one too.
Driveways, parking lots, those are not structures, but
We're
guys are
suggesting
learning.
and we're consenting. I'm very comfortable with these.
Okay. Mark Rondell.
Mark Rondell, what do you want?
You don't need to do that. We're working together.
What's that?
You don't need to say that.
Okay, all right. Okay, I don't know whether you got my letter. It was late for the packet. You didn't get it, but I guess you got that. So
We have training.
okay, so I just, I want to say that, I have a big problem with the phrase, consistent with the continuation of historical development. As I stated in my letter, I think this is either the origin or the justification for the prevailing attitudes of no change, as I said earlier. And I think that we need to desperately get away from this, this method of thinking in this town. And that's why I am suggesting that it is clearly obvious that the needs of the city's residents today in 2025, not to mention 20 years or 30 years in the future, are vastly different from those that were created by our historical development patterns back in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. And I would say that I was downtown today and I walked the length of Main Street, and the vast bulk of the buildings would be familiar to someone 100 years ago. Things have just simply not changed in this town for decades and decades and decades. And there is a desperate need that they change in the future. And this is our opportunity to address it. And the one other thing that I'd be interested to hear from John Icoangeli is where in Amber Realty it says inappropriate overcrowding, and how is that defined? Inappropriate overcrowding is a highly arbitrary and subjective phrase. You know, we may be way overcrowded compared to Cross Village, but we're nothing compared to Manhattan. So, you know, inappropriate overcrowding spans a huge spectrum. And I think if we're going to keep something like that in our code, we need to absolutely define it in Article 14. Thank you.
What would you suggest as a change to continuation of historical development?
As I wrote, I would write it in providing for all these uses, services, and infrastructure of the city of Harbor Springs shall promote and approve the development of land and the extension of utilities in a logical pattern consistent with adequate provision for demonstrated and anticipated future needs of all city residents and visitors.
Okay, let me observe that one for a little bit. So it'd be development in a logical pattern. That's one of the main concepts. The other one is in anticipation of future needs of residents.
Consistent with adequate provision for demonstrated and anticipated future needs of the city residents and visitors.
I have a question related to this topic. John, the phrase historical development patterns. I know preserving the historical look of our town is a hot button for many people. However, this could have been written historical, simply the fact that, you know, we've got to follow what's been happening through the years. What was the intent of that wording?
I think it gets into some of the community engagement that was part of the master plan, where people kept saying that they wanted to preserve the character, the charm, the small town qualities of the community. And when you take a look at a phrase like that, you're really, what people are really relying on or basing that opinion on and perception is basically how the community developed historically. Blocks, for example, sidewalks, pretty much a traditional grid street pattern, distinct neighborhoods. That's kind of what I looked at when I wrote that. Instead of writing a friendly, charming small town, it's what makes Harbor Springs is basically it's a resort community. I agree with Mark. Over the last 100 years, it hasn't changed. But then I have to ask the question, is that all a bad thing either?
Okay, thank you.
But again, that's a planning commission decision.
Any thoughts on that, planning commissioners?
I like John's verbiage. I like the wording in here. It's important to me.
Okay. Is it, do you like it because it could be purposely limiting?
Limiting is maybe not the word, guiding.
Guiding, okay. Other thoughts?
I agree with Chip. I like the wording the way it is in that section.
I guess I didn't read into it like that. I mean, we're in a grid system. Our water and sewer are in the grid system. Our streets are in the grid system and the sidewalks are in the grid system. I just kind of read it as that was the infrastructure.
Oh, okay.
I did not read into it charm and stuff like that.
All right.
Yeah, I'm fine with the verbiage as well.
I'm as well.
Yeah, this verbiage is fine.
Okay.
It's sort of like the nuts and bolts and stuff.
All right, sounds like that part would stay as written, based on consensus. Any other input on this section from the planning board?
Oh, on the purpose section
Yeah.
or on the whole?
On the purpose section, title and purpose. No? Okay, let's go to Karen.
Hi, Karen Oldfield. I'd like to go back to what Chip said about the environmental concern and opening a door. Bouncing off of what Mark Rundell said about the intentions of the future, I think that if we do not embrace an environmental future for our town, for our sidewalks, for our alleyways, for our roadways, for our corners, for our buildings, that we're really gonna miss out. And since the master plan is gonna start being reviewed over the next couple of years, because we have a review in 2 years, everything could be in cohesion with that. And it could sort of travel down the road of what are we gonna do to keep Harbor Springs environmentally safe?
Let me, Mr. Chairman, let me discuss that. health, welfare, health, safety, and welfare, those four words are consistently found in a lot of court cases, even Supreme Court cases. And they're fundamental to the police power of a local unit of government. And environment is included within those three words: the health, safety, and welfare. For example, if someone was polluting the lake or the bay, that would come under the health, safety, and welfare clause. So I think adding environment is just, it's not necessary, because the health, safety, and welfare have been determined and upheld by the courts as being fundamental to a local government's police power.
I think that's where we. And
I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's worth saying that since we aren't specifying those words here, that doesn't mean we're going to be ignoring environmental issues. The counter argument is a false argument. So we'll continue to support the environment. We just aren't going to include the words here.
All right, sounds like we have a consensus. Any final thoughts on this section? All right, John, you picked up a few changes from us there. We're gonna
Certainly did. Yes, thank you.
you're gonna see what the whole state's residence thing is all about, and see if we can delete
I'm
that.
gonna take a look at the statute.
Okay. Okay. Whew, all right, we got through a page. And people in the audience, I'm sorry, this isn't gonna be that interesting if you don't have something to look at. I know Jeff's got the page up there, and he's gonna do the best he can. So, yeah, if you have phones or tablets or whatever you want to follow along, great. But we'll figure this all out together. Okay. John, what's next?
Well, the next article is regarding the Board of Appeals, and we're not changing the structure of the ZBA. It's still 5 members. However, the proposed article clearly delineates the authority of the zoning board.
Yep, just a minute for folks following along with Article 11.
Article 11, yeah, the Article 11 basically states, falls back on the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, which has provisions already in the state statute for the ZBA and what it can and cannot do. The membership reflects the current membership of the ZBA. And we also have a part of the membership is the alternates that can sit in case a member is absent. It talks about the organization, that they have a chair, vice chair, a member of the city council and planning commission can serve on the ZBA, but they cannot serve as chair of the ZBA. All meetings are called by the chair at such time. It's subject to Open Meetings Act. And then it has the applications. And these are out of the state statute. Zoning Board of Appeals, subject to receiving an application through the zoning administrator, has the ability to appeal administrative decisions. Those would be decisions that are made by Jeff as the zoning administrator. The ZBA has the power to interpret zoning district boundaries. That's in the state statute. Not necessarily a big deal today because everything is done on GIS. But in years past, when the zoning maps were hand drawn, there was some issues with boundaries. But even today, if the GIS map is done incorrectly, and let's say the zoning district does not mirror the property lines, the Zoning Board of Appeals has the ability to interpret the zoning district. They can interpret provisions of the zoning district. These would be issues that are brought up by an applicant, like, can you give me some further clarification? I just had a case in another community where they received an application for a boutique gym, which was part personal training, part physical therapy. there was nothing in the zoning code that actually determined or established what district that could go into. So that was referred to the ZBA for interpretation, and they determined where that use would be located. We all know that the ZBA can handle variances. Those are dimensional and use variances, because the city of Harbor Springs is a city. Cities have the authority to do use variances through the Zoning Board of Appeals. There is a section on hearings and decisions, which refers to Article 12, where all of the public hearing notice requirements are thoroughly laid out. And then it has the limitations of the authority of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So this section, a lot of it, the majority of it, is basically a reflection of what is in the state statute relative to the authorities of the ZBA. I don't work with the ZBA in the city of Harbor Springs. Jeff does. So if Jeff wants to step in here and affirm or have any other observations about it, I'm happy to hear what he has to say.
I think that John has done a very good job of covering this. One thing that I did get a question from earlier in the day during business hours was that in the old zoning code, our article about the zoning board of appeals was only like 1 or 2 pages. And the new section here is like 5 or 6. But it really just seems to be spelling out with a little bit more clarity, you know, how things are laid out in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. I don't really see that there's anything different, just a little bit, just expanding a little bit of what's out there. But I think that it's very similar to what we had, and just providing a little bit more clarity with things that are in the state statute and Zoning Enabling Act.
So to that end, Jeff, I heard that as well. And actually, if you go in and you do a word count, the 439 verbiage is 980 words, and the 2005 verbiage is 1,091 words. So I just think it's the font, frankly, that makes it more pages.
Font and layout, I guess, then, yeah.
John or Jeff, like an article, or section 11.6, D, boundaries indicated as following railroad lines shall be construed to be midway between the main tracks. Is that lifted from the Michigan statute? You know, it wasn't really, I don't know if it really applies to Harbor Springs.
Yeah, I think it's lifted from the state statute.
So would we just keep that there as?
No, we can take it out. You know, I mean, it's kind of overkill, but yeah, Harbor Springs doesn't have any. Well, let me ask this question. Historically, you had railroad lines, correct?
Right.
Are any of the zoning districts following the old rail lines?
I don't believe so. We had rail lines, and I think this is probably in this from other communities where those rail lines are still in existence. I think at this point now in Harbor Springs, we no longer have property lines that are reflective of the old rail lines.
Okay,
So
because
it's probably not needed.
and we can take it out, because in some communities where they've taken the rail lines out and they've put in like non-motorized trails, the zoning districts still follow the old railroad right away. But that's a local decision. You know, like I said, it's a little bit overkill. We can take letter D out.
Well, I double check it. Yeah, I don't want any trails to go. But
Bay Street.
yeah, that's Bay Street. I don't know. I just think it's worth looking at to see if it follows it.
I mean, if no harm that it is in there, that's fine. I mean.
So one additional thought on that is, we don't know what the zoning boundaries are gonna look like necessarily, right? I mean,
Right.
we may be adjusting the zoning boundaries, and we may end up using rail lines as a zoning boundary. I don't know. I mean, to me, I totally get your point, Michael. But if it's not diluting what we're trying to accomplish here, then why not just leave it?
Yeah, it was just a question.
But it's abandoned rail lines, right? Because we're talking about boundaries indicated as following abandoned railroad lines. I know, but it should be, because, I mean, trust me, the railroad does not think that you own midway to their tracks, because they think they own their tracks. So I guess if it's not abandoned, then it's simply not correct, because the railroad will own the entire track.
All right, let me see, show of hands, planning commission, who says leave in the wording as is? For safety.
It's not hurting anything.
It's not hurting anything. I just.
45, who says take it out?
Either take it out or put the word abandon in.
Okay. Looks like consensus is leave it in, as is. Any other thoughts?
I have one for John. It's a homework assignment. 11.8. I noticed that non-use is in quotes and use is not in quotes, but then 11.8.1, 11.8.2, both terms are in quotes. And I just asked that you go back and make sure that all of those punctuation issues are clear and proper.
Will do.
Okay, got that done. Okay, Carter.
Yeah, I'm not positive this is covered here, but if you look at the lawsuits that have occurred, they've occurred around standing, and I'm not positive. I know that several lawsuits were around that in which the ZBA said someone didn't have standing, so we don't have to worry about it. And then that led to a lawsuit where it was a neighbor across the street in my case, in 2 cases, and so that just leads to an unnecessary lawsuit that could have been. Purpose of the ZBA is to allow administrative actions so you don't end up in a lawsuit. And so I'm not positive that's covered here, and I'm not sure in your case where you ended up having to go to city council, whether the language in here can make sure that it's addressed in the ZBA rather than triggering the ZBA saying, we just don't want to deal with that, and all of a sudden creating a lawsuit. So, because there's no other remedy for the person who's got it.
So the question is, now John, could you hear the question? I think, let me try to restate it. Is there something that should be in this chapter that talks about standing?
We're allowed standing not to be capricious. So it doesn't turn into a capricious type of response by the ZBA.
So we predefine.
In a situation where there's a dispute, for example, if the planning commission hears a zoning case and they determine to deny it, before the applicant would take that to circuit court, typically the judge is going to say they need to exhaust all of their administrative remedies. So typically the next step is the applicant then would go to the zoning board of appeals and ask them to review what the planning commission did, not their decision, but the process that they used and the standards that they used in order to make that decision. And if the zoning board of appeals finds that the planning commission did not follow the standards of the code, then the zoning board would remand the case back to the PC for reconsideration. If the ZBA felt that the planning commission did, in fact, follow its standards, then they would uphold that decision. And then at that point, the applicant's next course of action would be to go to circuit court and appeal the decision of the planning commission.
Got it. But that's about the applicant. So I think the question is, what about someone else in the community, for instance? Did they get a say in, is there anything that should be defined in here?
Yeah, the issue has been, I think if you look at the cases, the issue was the ZBA said, you don't have standing, so we're not going to rule on it. And so that forced it into the courts.
So only the applicant can,
That, in that case, it was, well, in my case, it was across the street, they're like, well, you live across the street, so you don't have standing, but I think several other cases have been, the ZBA's just rejected the discussion. Simply from a standing, so if somebody said, I don't like the decision that was made, they say, you don't have standing. There have been several court cases that have said, in fact, you do, and so it ends up being a little bit an arbitrary decision by the ZBA, and so courts consider it reported and wastes the town's resources.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, if I can recommend what this conversation is discussing, I think would be appropriate for Jeff and I to consult with Jim Raymer on this issue, because I think it, you know, there is other case law that may impact this, and I don't want to tell the planning commission something that would be inappropriate at this time without consulting with Jim.
great. So planning commission, is that something that warrants?
I guess I have a question. I think this is more of a ZBA issue, not our issue, right? And is standing definable, or is it, you want to make it reasonable, or I mean, how is that, how does it work?
I think that's why it's good to talk to Jim about it, but several of the court cases we've had have been around a debate on standing. So it ended up in court, so if we want to avoid that, it may make sense to adopt the proper definition.
In the ZBA issue, now, we're doing it all, I understand that, but it just regards the ZBA, how they rule.
And I don't know where I don't know if it's covered here or if it's covered in the ZBA bylaws.
Okay.
Worth looking into?
For protection for us, I think, yeah.
Okay.
It's definitely worth looking at.
Good.
Absolutely.
Rick?
2 points. On 11.3B, it states that all meetings of the ZBA shall be held at the call of the chair. Aren't those meetings set up by Jeff? They don't contact the chairman of the ZBA and discuss with them and then set up a meeting. Then they go through Jeff, and Jeff sets up the ZBA schedule. Isn't that correct? So shouldn't they be held at the call of? Yeah,
Secretary.
yeah.
And I think, this may be, I don't want to say deviation, but we've got this language, which is probably partially from state statutes and whatnot. We also have our bylaws, which kind of explain. So I certainly, I think we have language in our bylaws that say that the secretary, which would be me, is I'm in charge of setting up the agenda, packet for the meeting. But realistically, the chair is kind of setting the schedule for and meetings at the beginning of the year in January, when as a group discuss when they'll be.
Okay, so that's setting up the regular schedule, not individual people.
But special meetings, you still confirm with the chair. If Jeff had a request, he would still confirm with Bill to say we need a special meeting.
Or ZBA.
Or ZBA, yeah. With ZBA.
Okay, and one comment on 11.8.1. This new zoning ordinance is going to end up taking over 2 years to put together, and one of the reasons for redoing it is to help limit non-conforming properties. And DBA here has the authority to continually add non-conforming properties to the city all the time. I think somehow we need to reword the questions that they answer, because this is basically slanted to approve a problem, approve a variance to anybody that applies. And I think we just, the property is there, the boundaries are set, and no offense to Mark and Vanessa, it's up to the architect to build within those boundaries and to have them continually exceed that and go for a variance. We just need to stop it somewhere, you know, there's one coming up for 5 Beach Street where the current property has a 15-foot setback and they want to build to an 8-foot setback. Why do we have these ordinances? Why do we take the time to make them if we're gonna slant the questions people ask so that they can run roughshod over all the work?
Do we have control over those questions or are those questions mandated?
I think we should be very careful with that, you know, whenever anybody, especially with specifically talking about dimensional variance. There's a lot of court cases out there that talk about the applicant needs to define and convince the zoning board of appeals that they have what's called a practical difficulty. And there are a lot of court cases defining what that practical difficulty is, what they have to meet. We have a kind of a decision matrix that goes through the 4 to 6 steps of, you know, what makes up practical difficulty. So I think we should be careful on that we don't deviate too much from one, what the Zoning Enabling Act says and guides us. 2, you know, what aligns with court cases and decisions that the court of appeals where they've made back to zoning board of appeals.
Hey, John,
Yes,
I have a question. This is Mark. I have a question for you. We don't use the word hardship here. We use practical difficulty. At the county, we use hardship, the definition of hardship and self-infliction, all that kind of stuff. Is there a reason why we're not using that in our ordinance at the moment?
no, I've seen it used both ways, Mark, practical difficulty and hardship.
Okay.
It's really whatever the local unit wants to. I guess the practical difficulty and hardship are kind of one and the same in the practice.
Okay.
It's always incumbent in a zoning appeal that the applicant needs to submit to the ZBA that the following the ordinance would create a practical issue with the property, or, you know, and use the county's term, a hardship. But then again, it's the applicant can't create the hardship. I mean, like a financial hardship is not an appealable variance before the zoning board of appeals.
Okay, thanks.
Jen, it's Vanessa.
Yeah.
Couple of questions. 11.2 membership. 1 member may be a member of the planning commission and 1 may be a member of city council. Is it really may? Do we advise? Do we recommend?
Vanessa, the way it's written is, in some communities, if the ZBA is 5 members, there are 5 residents. They don't include somebody from the PC or from the zoning board of appeals. The way this was written was that the ZBA may consist of 5 members, 2 of which appointed by the city council. And out of that, there can be a member from the planning commission that can be part of the zoning board of appeals. So it's, remember when Bob was on the PC, Bob was also on the zoning board of appeals. So he was the planning commission member that was also on the ZBA. That's kind of how, I think that's how Harbor Springs has run it in the past. So unless you want to propose something differently.
I don't know if I want to propose something differently. I just know that that's been our practice and I didn't know if it should actually be put down.
City council appoints boards and commission members in their first organizational meeting, which is held immediately after the November election. And we are in a pattern of whomever is appointed to the zoning board, their term, the zoning board ends when their term on council ends. So I guess that's up to, if city council didn't appoint anybody, maybe that's where May comes in. I'd have to go back and look at the charter on that, but we appoint prior to the boards and commissions appointing in December, we appoint in November.
Okay, food for thought. In G, where it talks about the member that is on planning commission or city council, that is on that ZBA, that they cannot participate or vote on the same matter that the member voted on in the planning or the city council. Does that person not have a choice? Can they decide to vote at the ZBA level and then not vote at the planning commission and or council?
Jeff, how's it been handled in the past?
So I don't wanna say what the answer is. There is an answer, and we have had this discussion with Jim Raymer. He's provided us some guidance on that.
Okay.
We've also, when situations like this come up, we have frequently gone to Jim Raymer and said, is this a situation where that person needs to be cognizant of where they vote, whether they, will vote at planning commission or ZBA or city council, whichever the two of them.
But the way this is written, it says that they can vote in planning commission or city council. So what I'm saying is that somebody can choose to vote at the ZBA, have a very powerful vote, and make that choice to vote at the ZBA, and then just say, oh, I'm not gonna vote at it in planning commission or at council. This is reading like, no, you can't do that. If you're gonna be voting on this further down in the planning commission or the city council, then you can't vote at the ZBA. And I'm just wondering what it is that they can really do.
We can get some feedback from Jim Raymer on this. I know that he's provided some answers to this. It's come up before. It really doesn't come up that frequently. But when it does, we've gotten feedback from Jim, and I can provide some answers to you at a follow-up meeting.
And Jim has previously approved this language.
And this may even be language from the Zoning Enabling Act. John, you can correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, I'll take a look. I think it's in the ZBA.
Okay.
It's in the Zoning Enabling Act. But see, that's the purpose, Vanessa, for Article 11.2.1 alternates. If someone knows in advance there's going to be a conflict of interest, they would recuse themselves from the ZBA decision and bring in the alternate to hear the case if they know that they're going to have to render a decision on another body.
And then in 11.3A, a member of the city council and planning commission shall not serve as the chair of the ZBA. Can they serve as a vice chair?
Yeah, they just can't serve as the chair. That's how it's written.
And then when the chair is out because they're sick?
Well, in that case, they can serve as because that's that goes with the responsibilities of vice chair, just like you are. It just happens.
So I'm just reading Tony's cheat sheet here. He raised a good point. I didn't think of it before, but what he's talking about in section 11.6G, he's very confused. It was simplified by changing 50 feet to percentage amount, and that would make it more scalable to different size lots. I think it's a good point. Instead of having 50 feet, there are different size lots. Percentage might be more appropriate, and I think he's right on that.
Jeff, what's your thoughts on that?
I would question where that 50 feet came from and make sure that maybe there isn't some court decisions that created that. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other, but we should probably see where that came from. And if there's a reason that we chose that as opposed to a percentage. But if that's something that we can change, we can discuss. But realistically, I think when we reviewed the new zoning map, which obviously I think is gonna come under review again. I think we did a pretty good job of eliminating situations where one property was separated into more than one zoning district. We did have a few cases where that happened under the old zoning map, and it does create some issues. And I think that we should be consistent with that, and when we review for any potential changes to the zoning map, keep that in mind to try and make sure that this situation doesn't happen.
Okay. So John, could you research that 50 feet and see if that's,
Yeah, I'll take a look at it.
otherwise, it should make sense to change. Thanks for doing that, Chip. Yeah,
Tony's.
that's great. I got a quickie, 11.9. Exception, looks, I don't think that first sentence is a sentence. You can't diagram it with the object. I don't remember what subject. Annika, diagram this sentence for us, please.
It's a dangler.
It's a subject in the very beginning or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Doesn't look like a sentence to me. Yeah, John, could you take a look at that first sentence?
Yeah,
Bring it back to line, maybe just put in what you think.
yeah, I'll take a look.
Okay, great. And then another real quickie, 11.12 C. It talked about plan unit development. And I think we're just using the term plan developments in this framework.
Yeah,
You don't need the word unit. Okay, that's all I have. Here.
So if Article 11 is part of the reworked 20% of the 2005 code, I was wondering if Bob could tell me where it is in the 2005 code, where you compared it? Was it under the general
Yeah.
regulations?
Yeah, under Article 24, Board of Appeals.
Got it. Okay. The thing I was wondering about, since our world has changed so much, if this limit of authority of a year is, if it's still a smart time limit for these kind of issues to have to be resolved, and maybe Jeff would be able to tell us, is a year oftentimes too short for problem situations? Or is a year more than enough?
This is something that actually came up for discussion and was a change in our zoning code. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I could be wrong on that time frame, but it used to be 6 months. And that if, when the zoning board of appeals grants a variance, that it's basically limited to 6 months. And that we should caveat that once a variance has been granted and the property owner has, built the structure that they intended to build, it now runs with that property, for, I might be in perpetuity, but let's say that a property owner they get a variance to put a building in and they don't build that structure right away. That basically this sets the time frame for you have 6 months to start your project. And I think what we found was that 6 months, especially with the building season as it is, didn't quite work. And so we had a discussion, we modified it at that time to be 1 year. That also lines up with the planning commission and their site plan and special land use reviews. When they issue their approvals, it has historically been for 1 year. And so when we made that adjustment and change, part of it was to align with what other boards were doing for their approvals, which sometimes line up. So.
And so historically, that's still a good idea?
I think that most property owners and applicants, 1 year works. We've had very few instances where applicants have to come back and ask for an extension. I believe there is a caveat that they can ask for an extension for 1 year.
There is.
That's, it's still in the new code, yeah. So I think that that's sufficient. If it were to extend beyond that 1 or 2 year time frame, then maybe the zoning code has changed at that time and a new review of that, you know, approval and request should be heard.
Thank you.
All right, is it a wrap on that article? All right, let's do a time check. 7:20, we're coming up on the 2 hour mark. Should we go after another one?
Let's do one more.
Let's do one more. Yeah, see anything, okay. And that is Article 12, Administration and Enforcement. It's a tantalizing one. Yeah, what do we need to know about this?
Well, Article 12 outlines the responsibilities of the zoning administrator. It sets up a mechanism that the city council establishes the fees that will be used, that will be assessed to an applicant for their review, to handle their reviews, public notifications, mailings. It also has a provision for performance guarantees, which is a provision that the planning commission can require a performance guarantee to make sure that work that was approved and work that was promised by the applicant gets done in a timely manner. It talks about that when an application comes in, it's not only reviewed for content relative to the application, but the city has the ability, the city treasurer the city has the ability to make sure that the taxes on the property are current, as well as general assessments before any other actions taken on the subject property. 12.5 is the requirements that are in Public Act 110/2006, which is the Enabling Act, in terms of how a public notice has to be issued, in terms of the time frame, the days that it has to be in the newspaper before the meeting, and that everybody within 300 feet is notified. 12.6 talks about zoning permits and how they're issued by the zoning administrator. Within that section, it also not only says how the applications are approved and the zoning permit is issued, but how a zoning permit can be voided by the zoning administrator. Again, we use the 1 year date, which is consistent with the site plan review and ZBA actions. The last part is violation and penalties, which lays out how the violations are considered as a municipal civil infraction, what the penalties are, and basically nuisance abatement. So this article really is the kind of the role and responsibility of the zoning administrator and how the ordinance is enforced by the zoning administrator and by the court. So that's a review of the article. It's very procedural.
Yeah, John, I just have one question on this
Yeah.
one. When, where am I at? I guess I'm on 12.6.2C, property boundaries. We talk about along Lake Michigan. Should we say also Little Traverse Bay?
Where are you at, Vanessa? Which one? 12.1?
I'm on C.
12.6.
Well, yeah, 12.6.2 application C. In cases on properties located along Lake Michigan, should we
Okay.
also say Little Traverse Bay?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, why not?
I know, it's all Lake Michigan. I'm done wordsmithing.
John and Jeff, this is Bob. 12.6.2B. If the proposed location of the improvement is less than 3 feet from any required zoning setback lines, the zoning administrator may require a survey, blah, blah, blah. Is there a reason why we wouldn't always require a survey if it's in that situation?
Let's say somebody wants to put in an 8x12 shed and it's gonna be 30 feet away from all property lines. Do we really feel that the applicant should have the incurred cost of $1,500 to $2,000 for, I know this says 3 feet, but
Yeah.
if it's eminently clear that they're nowhere near any property line and a simple site visit would be able to identify that.
Yeah.
Basically, this is a section that provides me the ability to say, we can waive that survey requirement. I don't believe I have to waive it, but it provides the option
Yeah.
if we're able to verify it in other means.
Yeah, I guess I understand what you're saying, and I certainly want you to have the latitude to be able to do that. But I think the issue here is, as I read it, is if it looks like it could be pretty close to the setback, don't we want to make absolutely sure that it is within that setback area?
Oh, yeah, and this is certainly, this is a section, I believe, that's pulled straight out of the old code. And this is a great example of where I can refer to the zoning code to kind of help me with enforcement. When somebody comes in and they have a site plan drawn on a napkin or paper and pencil, it may clearly identify what their property looks like and where they're intending to put their structure. But it can be something where I can say, we need to verify, we need to have, and I can refer to this and say, I'm sorry to tell you, but the code requires me to let you know that we have to have a survey.
Okay, great.
So that I can get that extra detail that we need.
Got it. That's all I have on 12.
I have a couple of things. Working backwards, I guess, 12.7.1. Nuisance per se, any land dwellings, buildings or structures, including tents and trailer coaches. I can only imagine a trailer coach is like an RV or something like that. I don't think there's a definition of that. And so might there need to be a definition, number one, and number two, what about mobile homes? What about boats? You know, should we open up the wording to be more general rather than try to think of everything that's possible? I'll let you think on that one, John.
Yeah, I think that if you want to be all encompassing, there's a definition from there's a definition in one of the state statutes that where DNR has a fairly broad definition for recreational vehicles. I'll take a look at it and see if we can utilize that.
Yeah, I'd recommend that.
And structures is kind of all encompassing, so I think that would cover pretty much anything.
Well, I think, and certainly there's another section or two in the zoning code, both the old and the new, where we do reference recreational vehicles. I think that's also a phrase that we use in the city code. So for consistency, maybe pulling trailer coaches out, and replacing it with that might be appropriate.
I think that's fine. I'm open to whatever clarifying wording is out there. Let me move on, going backwards again. 12.6.2, both in section A2 and B2. It talks about the shape, size, and location of all buildings. I completely agree with that language, but I'm wondering if we should change the word size to outer dimensions, just to be a little bit more precise. That's up to you folks that want to wordsmith that, but it just seemed like it would be more consistent to do it that way.
So you're thinking the way it's reading now, it's the size of the building, but maybe that's not like taking into account the ease or something like that.
Yeah, size is a little more arbitrary than just what are the outer dimensions, I presume.
Size may be important because it could include height.
Okay, very well. So could outer dimensions.
But I like your outer dimension because then that starts bringing in those eaves, because so many times those eaves go way over and those can be in your setbacks and they're easily missed. So I do like.
Yeah, if there's a review, that seems like it would inform the decision a little better. Jeff, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. In 12.6.2.
Yeah, I see that. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. It may be that that's generic language that is commonly used, and that's why we pulled it. Back to eaves, we do address that later because we have some specific things about that, and so it's certainly covered. But John, I don't know if is that maybe just shape, size, and location of buildings. That seems pretty standard.
Yeah, it's standard.
Standard language.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna follow my sword for it. I just wanted to find out. Okay, no need to change if that's assumed language of reviewing and these things. 12.6.1, another small one. No person shall erect, alter, move, or demolish. We've heard some citizens talk about the process of deconstructing buildings. I'm wondering if we might want to add that word. Again, I don't feel strongly either way. I wanted to raise it at this point.
Can we also add move to that?
Moves on there.
Moves there. Thoughts?
They're gonna get a permit to do that, right?
Yes.
I don't have I don't have a problem with the word deconstruction. That's becoming more prevalent today.
In addition to what's already there.
Okay,
I like deconstruct.
we have a new idea.
And we're on a roll here. I've got two more in this section. Article 12.2 fees. I think, again, as it's stated, it's proper, it's correct. But I'm wondering if we may want to make a direct mention of the ZBA review request, because rather than just saying other requests, because I do know that the ZBA section speaks to the fact there are fees associated with people coming forward with that. That's an optional thing. I just didn't know if that would help make things more clear or not. So add in the language ZBA review requests as a specific language in addition to what's there.
I think that's actually covered under applications.
Okay.
And we don't call out any other boards. But I don't think there's an issue with adding that in.
Great.
I'm willing to yield to the consensus of the team here if you think it's worthwhile or not.
I think it's fine the way it is.
Okay.
Right, other have an opinion? Okay, fine, as is?
As is.
Okay.
Take it out. One last thing is back to Article 12.1.1. A. This speaks obviously to his duties or to her duties. And I agree with the language that's there, but considering these modern times, I know that we're thinking of potentially having a hierarchy for what is decided by the zoning administrator versus going before different boards or committees, depending on how severe the item is or how significant the item is. I'm just wondering if we should change that language or augment it to say receive applications for land use permits and issue or deny same as governed by section, whatever that section is. If we in the future have some sort of grid that decides who the teams are that have to determine whether something goes through or not.
Let me really what we should be doing is we can delete the word land use and insert the word zoning. Jeff receives applications for zoning permits and it's his decision. Either he issues or he denies them. And if he denies them, they either go to they may have to go to the planning commission for special land use approval, or they get bumped over the ZBA for a variance.
Okay. Yeah, just so you know my intent. Nowhere in this I want to restrict what he can do. I simply want to make mention of the fact that there could be a hierarchy that forces other things to take place, and I'm comfortable with your change. Jeff, what do you?
No, I think removing land use and changing that to permits, unless there's some legal thing that we find out later why that's there, but because really, in most cases, I am reviewing applications and permits and uses. Depending on that, what that use is, sometimes I might make that determination, but sometimes it's coming to the planning commission. So I can see that if it's left with this wording, there could be the question of, well, there's a new restaurant going downtown, that's land use, Jeff, you just do this. Well, no, the planning commission does it. Yeah. So yeah, removing land use and replacing with zoning, I think is great if John concurs, and I'm sure we did provide copies of these documents to Jim Raymer. He is reviewing them, and I'm sure any of the updates and edits that we do will run by him as well, and if he has any concerns, we'll know.
And I see Mike's fabulous iPhone has its hand up.
Yes, hands.
Speak again, you're kind of cutting in and out.
Sorry, I have a question as well as a statement. First, I'm wondering if the planning commission is still considering joining the RRC.
Is this Mike Kilburn?
It sure is.
Ah, yeah. Okay. It's Bill here. Yeah, why don't we talk about the RRC a little bit? Let's finish this article. Let's touch on that. And then, yeah, we can talk for a few minutes about that. I don't think we're gonna have much to offer. Okay, Mike, can you stay with us?
I'm with you. So are you going to answer my question first?
No. We're gonna come back to RRC and have a quick, robust discussion.
I guess back to this, I like Kenny's suggestion maybe of having, I don't know if it's obvious that Jeff's duties are specific and what he can and can't do. But do we need to add language to make it more specific and more clear? I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with what we're talking about, just change land use
to
zoning, and then that will trigger all the various processes. Like take a hypothetical, if we allow ADUs in the future, but it requires a big meeting with the public, then he obviously wouldn't have the authority to approve that on his own, but that would be stated as such, right?
It would be stated as such.
Yeah, it would be in the zoning code.
Right, okay.
So that would then put the guardrails around.
Yeah, perfect.
And I think that that's a suitable way to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, John, you on board with that?
Got it, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I have no further changes.
I got a quick key at 12.3. It talks about the issuance of a building permit. I think there might be some holdover language because the city doesn't issue building permits.
Yes.
We just issue zoning permits. The county does building permits. Yeah. John, Jeff, does that make sound right, or do we really mean that?
I would well, we have to have a trigger, and I would say get rid of building and insert zoning. Because Jeff's gonna have to issue the zoning permit. So he would have to, if it's required, the performance guarantee would have to be deposited prior to him issuing the zoning permit. And then after he issues the zoning permit, then the applicant or the contractor takes that over to Emmett County Building and they start doing their issuance of the building or electrical or mechanical permits.
Right.
So yeah, we can change building to zoning.
Okay.
It keeps it local.
Makes sense. Good. What else we got in?
I guess Tony's comments are just, he doesn't like the Latin. He doesn't like per se, and he doesn't like, de minimis, and have it not get an issue. I'm not sure. It's a 13.2.8.
It's all the titles. Like the
Yeah.
last couple.
And I mean, I don't have.
John, do we have to use Latin?
Well, I think those are legal terms.
Those are legal terms.
And I think that's why those are. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Lisa Morris. This is a section where the historic preservation could use some beefing up. Okay, so thank you, Kenny, for adding deconstruction. That was number one. In the 12.6.1 general,
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
12.6.1, no person shall erect, alter, move, deconstruct, or demolish a structure. Is a lamp post, a water fountain, a cannon, a anchor, a structure. So should we say structure or feature?
I believe in another section of the zoning code, we define what a structure is.
Okay.
It's also,
Anything that's attached to the ground.
so I think in our definition section is where we can address that.
Okay. All right, and then further on down, it says, let's see, probably about 8 lines down, Michigan Department of, it's talking about that other things may be required from, you know, soil erosion, Michigan Department of Natural Resources, or any applicable agency. I would like to add, and in the case of demolition, an affidavit of condemnation from a structural engineering authority or environmental authority.
Okay.
So a house can be taken down unless it's condemned?
Yes, because we're gonna encourage the deconstruct and the move.
No.
No, now we're telling someone what to do with their property.
Oh, okay.
I would disagree.
But you can tell them they can't do what they want with their property because they don't qualify for a soil erosion permit. I mean, I want to build my addition or my house in a wetlands. And if I can't get the soil erosion permit because I'm in a wetlands, I can't build my house.
Because
Well,
that's a
you're not
statute.
gonna be able to do it in the wetlands anyways, and the soil erosion permit is, what techniques are you going to be using to keep the sediment from going into the drains? And so you need that, everybody needs that for any kind of,
Right, but if I
Construction.
can't get that, does that mean I don't get my soil?
you can't do anything if you can't get your soil erosion in
Well, and
control.
Just adding the fact that, you know, in order to demolish a house, to actually tear it down, can't we ask people to get it condemned structurally or environmentally?
Why? No.
Because we're trying
No.
to encourage
No.
the moving and the deconstruction.
Well, people have the option to do that if they like, so I'm not gonna tell them to do that.
Okay.
That's not
I'm not
projecting,
agreeing to it. but I
that's
can agree
projecting
it's great.
like our values onto somebody else. That's it's so important to us that you have to do it too. And that's not gonna happen.
Jeff, back to your scale of 0 infringements on personal rights and total infringement on personal rights. This is moving way towards violence.
Thanks for the feedback on that. And I don't know if this belongs in here or not, maybe it belongs in the separate area. In the case of this deconstruction, provide a deconstruction plan listing the materials that will be salvaged, transportation mechanism, and storage plan for them. Is that getting, Ron, is that getting too much to the other end of the scale?
I think,
Who's gonna enforce it?
I think more to the point, this is kind of outlining the structure of, you know, what the zoning administrator's roles and responsibilities are. If you want language like that, and if the planning commission feels it's appropriate, I think there are other sections that deal more with what an applicant will need to provide, and that might be a better place for language like that to be put in.
Yeah, because I see that in other historic preservation ordinances, one in specific is Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. So, I mean, I've been reading other ordinances from around the country. And that's what gives me the ideas here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
some of this conversation regarding, you know, what the current conversation regarding these structures, deconstruction demolition or the idea of, they'd have to submit a plan for deconstruction, material list, blah, blah, logistics, transportation, if the planning commission is serious about that, that would go in the general provisions section, because then that would be applicable throughout the city regardless of zoning district. The other caution is that the state of Michigan does have a statute regarding local historic districts and what they can and cannot do. And they have certain powers that are outside of what is in a zoning ordinance. So I want to be careful that we don't include similar provisions that are in the local historic state statute into the zoning code, because it's not going to work from a legal perspective.
But Harbor Springs doesn't have a historic district, and not all the historic buildings or structures or features are located in a particular district. So we would have to make the city of Harbor Springs itself a historic district.
No, it's not, because it's not recognized. It's not recognized on the National Register of Historic Places, nor is it, there's only about a half a dozen properties that have historic designation, and those are found in the other article of the zoning code. But the city of Harbor Springs, to my knowledge, none of the neighborhoods are in a National Register district.
Right, so then your argument for not including language here, because the state historic district language preempts it, if you don't have a district, how could it preempt them?
You have to have a district to use the local, the concern that you have, or the proposition that you're putting out to the planning commission, is that you want to regulate someone's action on their property relative to if they're going to demolish or they're going to deconstruct their home.
Right.
Those are provisions that are applicable to the local historic district state statute. You cannot.
But the home doesn't have to be historic necessarily in order for us to meet the deconstruction purpose of keeping materials out of the landfill. I mean, if you built something 2 years ago and now suddenly you decide to tear it down, don't we want to keep those materials out of the landfill?
Yeah, at that point you possibly can, but you were also making the point about requiring somebody to have a structural engineer determine if the building was structurally sound or not structurally sound prior to demolition.
For demolition, but they can still deconstruct it.
That's true.
Keep it out of the landfill. So a lot of my language here doesn't necessarily narrow down to historic preservation.
A deconstruction, that, but your other proposition about requiring a structural engineer to make an opinion if the structure is sound or not sound before they can tear that down. That is not a zoning issue.
That's off the table.
Well, okay, just one more thing on that topic. If you don't require condemnation for demolition, how are you going to then say, but you can deconstruct it? Or how can you say to people, we would rather you deconstruct it because it's not in such a bad state that you have to tear it down? Do you see what I mean? Okay, so.
But you can hope to use education, and you can maybe hope to have information at hand.
Okay, so somebody comes in and says, I want to tear down, one of the cottages in Wheatley or up on Bluff, okay? If that building is structurally sound and environmentally sound, it's not full of mold and, whatever, termites and stuff like that, how are you going to ask them to deconstruct it rather than demolish it?
We're not.
Yeah, or encourage them.
We're not. A private group could do anything, with websites full of information, and resources, and publicity, and social media.
So you guys don't want the teeth to be able to do that.
Pardon me?
You guys don't want the teeth to be able to do that.
The teeth to be able to do that.
To be able to preserve to keep them out of landfills.
No.
Especially for historic buildings.
I don't think the zoning code is the proper tool to encourage somebody to deconstruct their home.
What would be then?
Education, perhaps other incentives.
Could be
community
private
groups,
incentives.
Well, and
clubs,
that's where
whatever.
the different section, we wanted to include incentives for people to preserve their home, you know, make it the demolition permit expensive, make the deconstruction permit less expensive, make the moving permit even less expensive, and the reuse and adaptation even less expensive. Is that the purview of the ordinance?
Don't think it is.
No.
Actually, I
No.
don't think that's fees.
Oh, okay.
I think city council sets all fees.
Well, this point was- I'll go hospital.
I think we have to also be careful with fees. I don't know if it's language that we have in our city charter, if it's state language, but the city manager has mentioned this a few times, that fees need to be respective of time and effort that we put in to justify that cost. We are a municipality and
They should not reflect ideas.
Yeah.
Public service.
so
It is to incentivize.
if the time involved in reviewing a zoning application permit is 2 hours of my time and I get paid $50 an hour, whatever it might be, you know, then our cost for that permit reflects that. You know, it would be difficult for us to justify tacking on some fee that's not based on our time.
Right, because then that's a penalty. And actually, if you were to probably take that, you'd probably find that the permit fee for deconstruction would be more because there would have to be a tremendous amount more work going into it, so.
Right. Well, and as opposed to penalties, there are also incentives, you know, we'll give you a tax break if you reuse it or move it or.
Yeah, that's not, that's not done.
So again, forgive me for my dubiousness.
Us too?
Yeah, because I've not done an ordinance before. Like I said, I've been looking at other ordinances like Lancaster County and things like that, and I do see this in their zoning ordinances.
Okay.
That's why I thought it was appropriate for this zoning ordinance.
Mr. Chairman,
So let's bring this together, guys.
I do have one final suggested change, and that is 12.6.1 is misnumbered. It's typed as 12.6.2. I think we need to correct that.
Wait, what is, where?
Under 12.6.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'm sorry, my copy here has it misnumbered, but your copy is correct, so, all right, so be it.
Where'd you get yours?
From over there.
That's the other, there's conspiracy.
Yeah. Anyway, as long as it's correct on the master copy, I'm fine with it. Here,
Oh, great, Jim.
I'm not crazy.
All right,
No.
all right, let's take stock. We have, we feel good with what we've done today on 3 articles. And let's not go any further tonight. Agreed?
Agreed, permanence and severability looks short.
So let's talk about next meeting 2 weeks from tonight. We had on the docket to do articles 6 and 8. Should we move 13?
Yeah.
We didn't get to, yeah.
Sure.
6 looks pretty meaty. So let's just figure we're gonna do 13 and 6.
I don't think 13 will take a long time, but.
No, I didn't have 13, so it should go
I
fast.
would leave it, Bill.
Oh, leave 8 on there, and, yeah, see if we get to it.
See if we get to it. Sure.
Beautiful, okay. And regarding next week also, you know, we had a learning segment today. And boy, at the last town hall and the last open house, people were talking about buy right develop. And so Jeff actually had an idea to propose a quick learning segment at the beginning of next meeting to talk about buy right development so that we can learn what that's about, what the different definitions could be and different understandings. Does that sound?
So in 2 weeks?
Yeah, in 2 weeks. First thing, 15 or 20 minutes up front. Good?
Good with that.
Okay, and then John, will you be able to bring us back red lines of what we did tonight?
yeah, they'll go out in your packet with, I'll resubmit Article 13, you'll get 6 and 8. And then I'll include the red lines for the 3 that we went through this evening.
And do you want to go over the red lines first before we go into other articles?
Yes, I would prefer that we take a look at the red lines, and if the PC is comfortable with the changes, then we can put those in the complete list and move on to the next group.
Okay. So, learning segment, review red lines, move on to the new articles. Okay. All right,
I've been trying to, I have one last question about, Article 12. It's the public, notice, 12.5.1, and I just want to make sure that the 15 days, is still relevant and that, sent by email or personal delivery. I'm wondering if it could be electronic, anything electronic, if it should be modernized.
Not in the state statute yet. This is right out of the state statute.
Thank you.
old fashioned. Right. Are we locked on our 3 articles that we're feeling good? All right. And let's quickly move into the RRC. And so this has gotten a lot of talk lately. As it has over the. Yes.
Oh, I wanted to go back to the last item on when Jeff gives your presentation on by right. Could you tailor it to the RRC for us rather than general, since that's our problem?
John Michaelangeli will be giving us a briefing on that.
Oh, I thought Jeff was. Well, then John, could he tailor it to the RRC, not just by right as a, that's our problem here is the RRC and by right.
It may not be. No, let's go with the general understanding and then we can dig down if you want to.
Oh, I think we want to, yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the RRC then.
Not Bill, I mean like next time.
No, I have a question. I understand.
Yeah.
Michael Kilborn, did you want to address us about RRC?
Hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, so first, we as a city can do better without RRC. Everything that you can do within RRC can be done without RRC. So I'm surprised that that subject keeps coming up as though it's foregone conclusion that we will be in the RRC. You might know that the city of Dexter recently backed out of the RRC, and I called the planning director, first name is Michelle, and she made it real clear that the RRC had been moving the goalposts, as she said. And she elaborated a little bit, but the bottom line is that they are happier without it, and I completely understand it, and do not understand why, with all of the, with the referendum, et cetera, the Planning Commission is still working with the city council to bring RRC back into the formula. Any comments?
Planning Commission, are we pushing for RRC certification?
No,
not at all. Do we control?
that wouldn't be our duty anyway, right?
Right.
You're right. City council.
Nor do we ask
don't-
city council to do anything.
Is there any reference to RRC in either of the 2 zoning codes?
Michael Kilborn, can
Yeah, so
can I read your letter to the city manager from yesterday?
Sure, go ahead.
Or would you like to?
No, go ahead.
Okay, let's see, looks like Mike Kilborn sent this to city manager Victor yesterday. February 5th, Victor, it's hard to understand why you, the city planning commission, and certain members of the city council want to continue with plans to qualify for RRC, especially since the recent successful referendum to stop the city from getting involved in RRC, et cetera. If it means another fight to stop the unwanted zoning changes and the RRC again, my neighbors and I are prepared to start another petition to stop the clear disrespect for the residents of Harbor Springs. It appears revising the already rejected zoning code changes, and especially the RRC, is all related to your desire for new development and the quest for more money in the form of taxes and grants. I'm surprised that you are not aware that it is possible to obtain state grants without being part of RRC. The Michigan Treasury administers grants by various departments, including Michigan Community Revitalization Program, Community Development Block Grant, Revitalization and Placemaking, Strategic Outreach and Attraction Reserve Fund, etc. The Council of Dexter, Michigan, this is what Michael just told us about. Anyway, the conclusion is we do not want the same zoning rules that were rejected last fall. We do not want Harbor Springs to be involved with the RRC program. Clearly, you do not care, so let the fight begin. So, Michael, we got your message. We just don't have any control over the RRC. It's not going to factor in our decisions. It's not going to be a factor. We just don't care. Does anybody have any comments, or planning commission, do you have any reaction to this letter?
Well, I mean, I have a reaction. I'm not, I don't see any reason for us to be in the RRC. And as a planning commission member, I don't think it's my role whatsoever. I mean, I'm asking the question, would we ever talk about making a proposal to, I mean, it's not in our purview, is it?
No, Chip, you're 100%.
So, I mean,
Make a recommendation.
I mean, I can see going in front of, as a person, as a property owner, going in front of the city council and making a pitch, but not as part of this role, I don't think.
As I said at the Tuesday night town hall, we've had lots of conversations about many, many issues that pertain to zoning. I've never once heard, we've got to do this in support of RRC from anybody else.
So is it just plain and simple, the planning commission has zero to do with the RRC, plain and simple. Not your territory, not your business, not your opinion, nothing. So if people want to discuss RRC, who are they supposed to be talking to? Because none of you guys is an RRC conversation, right?
That's right.
So who should they talk to?
The city council.
Okay, so then they need to talk to Wendy, Tom, Michael, Kathy, and Jamie. So if there's a question, a confusion, an opinion, an argument, a robust discussion, they have those discussions with those individuals, not you guys, right?
That's right.
You guys are a waste of time if they care about RRC, correct? Do we all understand this?
The issue I have with that is that the RRC is a cloud over this process. Whether it's an appropriate cloud or not, I don't think it is. By us getting out of the certification process of the RRC, I think it would eliminate a lot of noise associated with this process. And so, I mean, that would be helpful. But I mean, I'm saying that as a resident, not as a planning commission member.
Take that to the city council.
Yeah, but there is a lot of noise here because of that. That's,
I just want to say,
excuse me, isn't it true that we are the city under the old code, which is the current code now, weren't we already some kind of RCC? We already were there already with the old code.
Mark, I've got some brand new information on that, but we can go into it in just a second.
Okay.
Mark.
I just want to say, as a long time voting resident of this city, I believe personally that there is no other city in the state of Michigan that is more needing redevelopment than this city.
I also just want to make it, this is Nancy Rondell. That's a threat. I take offense at a letter like that. If the city wrote letters like that to their residents, can you imagine? I mean, let the fight begin and accusing you, city council, that's a very offensive, he has an absolute right to feel how he wants to feel about RRC, but that's a very threatening letter. That's really an inappropriate letter for someone to write to you guys.
Very non-Harbor Springs.
Yeah, talk about small town character. I mean, I'm very disgusted with the.
Yep. Well, let's see.
We've got Linda Rockwitz and iPad Home with their
Okay.
hands raised.
How about iPad home?
Good evening, JR from the city of Harbor Springs.
You use your
I
last name?
sort of wanna, not bring this up, but
JR,
Yeah.
can you use your last name too?
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, what's your name?
I already said it's JR from Harbor Springs. So I just have two things real quickly. The gal that stood up and was, I hate to bring it up, but the gal that stood up and was talking about not dumping a bunch of stuff in the landfill. Can I get her name? Because for the last 2 years, my property is abutting a project that's right on the bluff, and that's all that's been going on. Giant dumpsters up and down the easement the entire summer, and I'm really curious, and I support what she's saying, and I think that there's a way the city can encourage those huge deconstruction projects from filling up our transfer station. So
Right.
that's the
Okay.
first thing. So we just need to be guided in where to go to start building a possible policy with that. Number one. Number two, I'm glad you clarified the RRC in terms of planning commission and appropriate tasks that you guys do. Can you, and I kind of heard Chip going down this road a little bit, is it possible that you could, because you've listened to all these town halls and meetings, listening meetings, and everybody, not everybody, but a majority of people do not want to be in it. Can you say, this is what we're hearing and we recommend to the council? Can you do that? Can you make a recommendation based on public input?
We've definitely shared the intensity and the feelings with city council. They've
Oh,
heard it.
you have already?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that would be helpful and satisfactory to people, is if you could make a documented recommendation. So I just had those two comments. Thanks.
Linda Reckwitz. Are you there, Linda Reckwitz?
I believe I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Mr. Krillborn, surely you understand that Victor is doing what he is directed to do by the city council. Until he is directed to disengage with pursuing RR certification, he is doing his job. It's wrong to accuse Victor of not caring. Scapegoating is going to be far more harmful to Harbor Springs than the RRC would be. Thank you.
Okay. People have had their comment, and RRC is top of mind, believe it. I want to address one other thing in Mr. Kilborn's letter. I would love to prove him wrong about getting back the same old zoning ordinance again. What we've said in our open houses and others, it's a blank sheet and we are wide open to changes. In fact, we're actively looking to change things because we can't bring back the same ordinance again. So sky's the limit. You know, we got a taste of it tonight. You know, maybe Mr. Kilborn, you know, hasn't felt the positive vibe in the room the last few meetings and in comments. So anyway, I hope to prove him wrong. And
Believe me, I'm working on it.
Article 2, good. Everybody wants to get to that, and I do too. Okay, RRC development number 2. John Icoangeli, do you want to explain what has happened?
In regards to what, Mr. Chairman?
The letter that
Oh, okay.
city got from the
Yes, what I had always maintained at the very beginning of the zoning process that the current zoning code that we are operating under, not the 439, which was repealed, but the current code already meets the essential status of the RRC program. So I contacted MEDC and I contacted the Northwest Michigan rep and the department director. And I asked them to take a look at the current zoning code, evaluate it from their perspective, pretty much do an audit, and determine if it met the essential or the certified status of RRC. And based on that request, about four weeks ago, we did receive a letter basically stating that, not basically, it did state that the current code for the city of Harbor Springs already meets the RRC essential status. So I've always maintained that this issue regarding RRC and its connectivity to the zoning code was a bad thing. We've been operating under it since 2002. So the RRC best practices are already incorporated in the current code. And that's
Okay.
what the letter from MEDC said.
So that's interesting. We'll get copies to everybody. You can check it out. And I understand it doesn't eliminate concern with the RRC as a whole. But, maybe it takes a little bit of a cloud off the motivations to, update the zoning code because we're already there. It's kind of good. Any comments or? Okay. I have one other quick news item for you. Let's see, I don't know if you noticed, Charlie Hollerith was here today. He was in the back row. He's the chair of the West Traverse Planning Commission. And he stopped in here and he's visited us a couple times. He's a good guy. And they've got a lot going on over there at West Traverse too. I want to tell you about next Wednesday night is their planning commission meeting, and they're working on 2 articles of their master plan. And so for people who want to get involved in that, it's wide open, and I'm sure they'd love to have a bunch of people from the city come over and give them some good input on that. And but no, they're a really good group, and they're thinking about the big things right now for their world. I think that was it. All right, thanks everybody. Good meeting.